presentations, chairing meetings, presenting and coaching the team, but a lot of my team are working kind of 80% of the time in the lab on experiments and the like. So yeah, I think that's kind of a general overview of what my day-to-day looks like. But let me know if you've got any questions and I'll be happy to answer.
Lovely, thank you. So now we'll also hand over to Nick and he will introduce himself and a brief overview of his role as well.
Thanks, Holly, and Tammy. It was lovely to hear about your journey from Birmingham to the Binding site. I think I have some colleagues actually that you may want to
really?
I'll chat
Lovely
to
meet you as well.
So yeah, I'm Nick. I work for this company above me called Apconics. So Apconics is a non-clinical safety CRO. So lots of words and phrases there that you might not be familiar with. So I'll explain them. So a CRO stands for a contract research organization. And in the world of pharmaceuticals and indeed in the world of medical devices and the area that Tammy works in, a CRO is an entity that is commissioned by a client. That can be an individual person, it could be a large company. They are commissioned to do scientific research, and that comes in all shapes and sizes. So that could be in vivo animal testing. It could be consultancy, it could be in vitro work, it could be chemical synthesis. There are a large number of different CROs, particularly in the UK. The UK is a real hotbed for CROs, and there's a quality mark there for how people judge British CROs across the world. And the second phrase there I mentioned was a non-clinical toxicology. So toxicology is the study of the potential harmful effects of chemical exposure to not just human, but also to different mammalian species, plants, and the environment. And non-clinical is the stage before a drug makes it into the clinic. So the work that I work on, and the area that I specialize in, is predictive safety. So my work is all about how can we get medicines into patients as quickly and as safely as possible. And what Apconic specializes in is that early predictive safety. So can we predict how a patient might respond to new medicines before they even make it into patients? And that's what I work in. I've been with Apconics for nearly 5 years now. And yeah, that's my day to day. And I'm happy to share the rest of my journey as this conversation goes on.
Lovely. Thank you both for just giving us an overview. So for all of our participants, so I have now put the link for the Slido in the chat. So you can click on the link, or you should hopefully be able to see the QR code on screen, but use either or and submit questions through there. And I will probably pose it as a general question, but if you have a specific question for either of our speakers, then please do mention that somewhere in your question so we can get it to the right person. But to start us off, I just have a few questions. So it can be obviously really hard to summarize your job into what you do and to keep it really brief. And for most of us, every day can look quite different in our jobs. So I guess for the both of you, what are some of the core activities that might make up a typical week for you?
Would you like to go first, Tammy? Or?
I'm happy for you to take it away.
Okay, cool. So I'm very fortunate in my job that I get to work with a number of different scientific collaborators and clients, big and small. So sometimes they could be working with an academic that has a spin out from their university position. So again, another phrase, apologies, a spin out. That would be where, say, an academic has a scientific idea, and they'll go to a business team at their university and try and drum up a way or drum up attention for how that scientific idea can become something commercial and can become a business. So I might be working with someone as small as a single academic in a spin out, all the way through to working with a client in a global, top 20 big pharma company. So on a daily basis, I'll be working with those as a consultant. Um, and answering a whole raft of different interesting and scientifically challenging questions. Um, so that's what is a really, really exciting part of my job. So sometimes that could be working with a big pharma client who is going through a regulatory decision. So again, another phrase, regulator. So a regulator, the FDA in the US is probably uh, something that everyone will be familiar with. The FDA is a regulator. In the UK, we have something called the FSA, the Food Standards Agency, or we have the MHRA, the Medicine Health Regulatory Authority. These are all governmental regulatory bodies that ultimately give the sign off for for a scientific idea to make it into patients or to be signed off as a consumer-based product. So yeah, it might be that I'm working with my client and they are very, very, very close to their product making it into a human clinical trial and going into patients that need it most. And they come to people like me to help them push their idea across the line. So yeah, they're exciting things in my day-to-day. Tammy.
Thank you. That was very interesting to hear about your background. I think I'd like to touch on one of the points actually that you mentioned about spin-out companies. So the Binding Site was originally a spin-out company from the University of Birmingham and now is kind of like a global organization. So I guess there's probably a bit of crossover between us there, which I think is just quite interesting as well. So a typical day for me, so I'd say my days are kind of a mixture of meetings, reviewing kind of data, experiments, or supporting my team in the lab. But I think kind of my favorite days, again, like coaching a team through their investigations. Something might have gone wrong in manufacturing. Maybe a product's not working quite as we wanted it to, or maybe we want to implement some new equipment or a process we want to scale it up. So trying to design an experiment to test parameters. And then once we've worked out what we want to do, then trying to work out how to implement that into manufacturing. I think one of the points that Nick mentioned was about regulatory bodies. I think that's something that is quite different when you're in the world of work, understanding how you fit into those regulations, making sure you have the data to be able to implement the changes that you want to. But I think as well, my days are generally quite varied. And I think there's always new things cropping up, new products that we might be launching. So there's always something new to get stuck into. And I think my role now is kind of coaching a team through the various different projects that they might be working on and giving them guidance and seeing how we can kind of help them day to day. But yeah, it's definitely a very varied role in what I'm in now.
Lovely. It sounds like you both get up to some really exciting things in your work. So we've had a question come through, and from the phrasing of it, I think this will be one for Nick. So we've had one come through of what made you want to work for a CRO and what are some of the pros and cons of this?
Interesting. So I'll very briefly map out to kind of how I got to Apconic. So I took a non-traditional journey, if we can call it that. So I did my first degree, my undergraduate, in what is essentially bioanalytical chemistry. And then I went and worked for a CRO called Huntington Life Sciences / Harlan Laboratories. They merged into one. And there I worked as a bioanalytical chemist working in the field of ecotoxicology. So that particular CRO, my particular job there was working in a different sector entirely. It was mostly in the petrochemical industries. So we'd have various different lubricants sent to us from different clients. and we would perform regulatory toxicity testing to understand what might be the impact on the environment for some of these lubricants if they were leached into the waterways, for example, or leached into different habitats. So that was my first experience of working in that CRO, and I was based up in Derbyshire in the East Midlands. And I really, really enjoyed it because there were some projects where I was aligned to one particular client, and that was really exciting because you got to kind of nurture their project and become as invested in their project as that one particular client was. But then equally, I managed to work on a number of projects across a number of different clients and different chemical entities. And that was really, really exciting because again, no day was the same. So yeah, that was really exciting one for me. And I think because my role was so varied there, I got a lot of different exposures to different techniques, scientific techniques, analytical chemistry techniques. I got to work with a number of different scientists and collaborators that perhaps I might not have been afforded that opportunity had I worked in a fixed domain or for a fixed company that did one thing. So I worked for that CRO for a while. I then came to the University of Birmingham and undertook a research master's in toxicology in the School of Biosciences. And then after that, I went back into industry. So I went and worked for another CRO. This time I worked for a drug discovery CRO, so an entirely different domain to the one I worked in at Huntingdon Life Sciences. This one was called Signature Discovery. They're based again in the East Midlands in Nottingham. They now have sites in various places around the world. But that one there, again, I was able to work on a fee-for-service basis. So that is where a number of different clients would commission various different assays and various different kind of consultancy agreements across a variety of different projects. So that was really exciting to work on a number of different scientific techniques for a number of different clients. But equally, I was afforded the opportunity to kind of lead and project manage a particular project for one particular client. So again, that was really exciting for me to have. On one hand, I was able to experience lots of different capabilities, and on the other hand, I was able to help nurture a singular project and a singular product. So that was really, really exciting for me. And again, the scientific exposure because of that was quite broad. So I was able to work there on lots of integrated drug discovery projects. So I was able to work with pharmacologists, organic chemists, organic medicinal chemists. I was able to work with project managers and data scientists. So again, that collaborative nature was something that really sparked my interest. And then after that CRO, I came back to the University of Birmingham again and did a PhD and a postgraduate certificate again in teaching and learning. And then I now find myself at another CRO called Apconics, which is a slightly different area again. Again, this is non-clinical toxicology. So most of my clients are from pharma and biotechnology, but I do work with some clients that are in the consumer healthcare space, and I also work with some clients that are in the kind of agrochemical space. So they might be developing crop protection agents, for example, and they want to understand what might be the consequences if a farmer is spraying their field with these crop protection agents, what might be the impact on the environment around them. So again, yeah, a CRO for me has been a really fulfilling place to learn, both scientifically and professionally. And again, that exposure you get in a CRO to different domains that are outside of your own expertise has been really rewarding. So yeah, I digress now.
No, wonderful. Thank you for that. And we're getting some more questions coming through as well. So obviously we've got quite a lot of students who are interested in the pharmaceutical sector as a whole. So for the both of you, are there any sort of like emerging trends that you're seeing coming through in the sector? And if a student wanted to find out more about these, where would you maybe sort of like direct them to have a look and learn more?
You're pointing to me. I guess difficult for me to answer specifically on the pharmaceutical sector. I guess I work more in the kind of medical devices, but I can answer probably more to that. I think there's a lot of new products coming onto market that have, I think the best way to learn about them is through looking at maybe articles like Nature, different kind of like publications such as that, just to see what's cropping up really. And I think just having an oversight of what news coming to market that you can kind of give you something to talk about in an interview so you know what the rest of the industry are doing. I think that really helps you if you're trying to get into the sector. But I think, yeah, specifically pharmaceutical sector, I probably wouldn't know too much about that. I don't know if you've got any other insight on that, Nick.
Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, so I would say part of my journey has been kind of self-identifying mentors or other scientists whom I think have like a really interesting journey for how, what they do and how they got there. So one of the earliest things I did straight after my undergraduate was joined a learned society. So that one has been a really of utmost importance to me. So I've maintained a membership with the British Toxicology Society for the best part of 10 years. And I've had various other memberships with learned societies for, in the realms of pharmacology or medicinal chemistry. So they've been really key for me because you go to those learned societies, and that's where you get to see speakers, you get to see what is new, what is exciting, what are the trends, and you get to learn about the skills gaps as well. So the British Toxicology Society with the University of Birmingham, so I should give the University of Birmingham here a plug. But for over 40 years now, the University of Birmingham have hosted a master's course in toxicology. And that master's course recruits students from biological, chemistry, physical science, backgrounds, and puts them into industry. Um, toxicology is toxicology and the world of DMPK, so that stands for drug metabolism and pharmacokinetics. These are two discipline areas, around occupational health as well, that they have significant skills gaps in the marketplace. So yeah, some academics from the University of Birmingham very recently published a paper with the British Toxicology Society on exactly what are those skills gaps. So I was really fortunate enough, because I became a member after my undergraduate degree, I was very fortunate enough to learn very early on what were those skills gaps. And because I used to attend scientific meetings at the society, um, I was able to start upskilling myself in those areas. And I think because of that, I was able to find mentors through the society, build academic collaborations as well, and publish papers. Um, and yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am now, is understanding those skills gaps and what can you bring to the marketplace that doesn't exist there currently. I think as Tammy was saying, there are a number of new medical devices and medicinal products coming to market that are things that we've never seen before scientifically. They are very, very novel. And therefore, the way they are tested for, or the way they are regulated, or the way they are sold, again, are quite novel. And they require, therefore, novel thinking. So yeah, some of the skill sets that I certainly now have in my role are not necessarily offered by universities, because they're recognizing skills gaps. So yeah, learned societies, a big one for me. Learned societies and understanding the importance of being on committees.
Yeah.
Ideally, that would be a scientific committee, but equally other committees that bring people together to answer important questions. Tabby, do you have anything else on that?
Yeah, no, I think the point you mentioned about mentors is quite important. And I think the university offer quite a lot of mentorship opportunities, I believe, which I think definitely take advantage of that, or even just find people on LinkedIn that you think you've got a really interesting job and ask them about what they do, like learn from the people who work there, keep up to date with their posts or any companies that you see, because most often if they've got a new product out to market, they'll be posting about it. And I think that that's how I kind of try and keep at the forefront of the industry, is understand what else is at market, because to make yourself valuable to a company, you need to understand who your competitors are. And I think you don't need to know everything that's out there, but I think just having an idea what's kind of at the forefront really helps put you in good stead when you get to trying to get into the industry as well. I think, yeah, mentors definitely. And I think any opportunities to attend kind of scientific seminars or lectures, even if they're not put to you, if you find something that you want to attend, I think that shows a lot of kind of like acumen in yourself to try and put yourself out there. And I know that I've definitely attended them and not realized what else other companies are doing. So I think any kind of seminars, lectures that you can get onto is another good way to try and get a wider field of view.
Definitely.
Lovely, wonderful. And for some of those as well, obviously keeping up to date with what's happening and what's going on, especially what you mentioned, Tammy, around using LinkedIn, finding the people doing the jobs that you're interested in, which is something we recommend to students to start that networking, and obviously find out a little bit more. But it's something we talk about to get more of that information to make them a competitive and a strong candidate when it comes to their applications and in interviews. So from both of your experiences, are there any tips that you would give to our students to make them competitive and a strong applicant when they're going through the recruitment process within this particular area?
Just trying to think off of that. So that tips to make you a strong applicant when you're kind of going into interviews.
Yeah.
I think definitely having a strong LinkedIn profile. Like I know when I've done recruitment, that is the first thing I look at. Like what image are they putting out there of themselves? What activities have you done outside of just being good in your career? Because you're not just hiring someone to do just the job they're doing. You want a well-rounded person who's done things to build kind of those other skills, soft skills, etc. So I definitely think even though it shouldn't be based on a LinkedIn profile, a lot of the time that does kind of factor into you getting an understanding of someone. It's a really short time to try and prove yourself. So anything else you can do to try and explain how great you are, I think that's a good part of that. I think experience, it sounds a bit like cliche, but it does work. I think like we've had quite a lot of work experience students here who come try and do a week just kind of shadowing. Just having that gives you an insight into the industry so that when they ask questions, you can try and give really good examples of where you've seen it. So not just saying, I think you need to have great teamwork. You can give an example of where you've seen that when you've been shadowing someone. So I think any kind of experience you can get. I know there's quite a lot of internships through the university. So either a year in industry or even I think I did a couple of summer placements at the university as well that I think really helped me. Even though I'm not necessarily in the academia field now, I think they help me build the skills that I use day to day now. And not even necessarily just the scientific skills, but how to work in a team, how to present scientific data, all of those skills that really do help you when you come to trying to set yourself aside, because it's really difficult because there's so much competition out there. So you've really got to think about what makes you you and how can you make yourself stand out in the short space of time that you've got. I don't know if there's anything else that you've got, Nick, to add to that.
Yeah, please don't use AI. I know some students will probably tell you about so, but it is glaringly obvious when a CV or a cover letter has been written using such tools. It's very poor. Still for me, grammar and spelling are big ones for me. So that's something I always look out for. But also the number of interview panels I've hosted, not only here at College but elsewhere, where it's really not obvious that that person has researched anything at all about the company to which they're applying to. And when I say company, that could equally be applying for like a research position with an academic. You know, if you can go into the interview kind of understanding some of the problems that that company might have, and hence the reason they have an open position, then you probably stand yourself in good stead. So understanding, what are going to be their bugbears? What changes does the company going through at the moment? What are the challenges that, potentially face that company or that group that you want to join? So make it, you have to make it about you, but more important than that, you have to sell yourself as I'm here to help you solve a problem. And I actually understand from a human empathic point of view, I understand, company director X, what your problems might be. So I'm not suggesting that you should, sell yourself and give away your time for free. But actually, when I was at Apconics and before I joined Apconics at the end of my PhD, I knew one of the company directors already quite well, but I did put together a few. I can't remember what data I analysed now, but there was some data from the public domain, and I did some mock data analysis for them about how they could better depict some of the data sources they're using in their client-facing database. And it didn't take me much time to do it, and I certainly wouldn't have invested weeks and weeks into it. But I did do that, and I shared that with them. So I gave them, like an artist, I kind of shared my portfolio, as it were. If you were a musician or an artist, those trades are quite used to maintaining a portfolio. And I think as a scientist, you should equally maintain a portfolio. So it's less about just your CV, it's about what is your tool chest? What is your armory, and what are the ways that you can communicate or share that with the group that you want to join? So yeah, I think that human element is quite important for me, and I think as Tammy was saying, actually, I've interviewed people here where some of my colleagues have said, why are we interviewing that person? They've only worked in a cafe or a hair salon, there's not much work experience. And I say, well, actually, that proves great work ethic. I'm of the mindset of like, if you can work, many hours in one of those establishments, in a bar or restaurant or somewhere that you're having, commands and demands thrown at you, then you're probably going to be able to handle yourself quite well in a commercial environment when you're faced with a client. So, see if there are ways in your CV that you can make that work to your advantage. Don't just say that, I had X, Y, Z, job in a cafe. Embellish that a little bit, make people understand exactly what your role was and what the skill set is that is given you. So yeah, again, I digress.
I think that's a really good point, because I think I've had CVs where I can tell that it's kind of a blanket CV, and you kind of think, oh, is this person kind of actually invested in that role? But if they've tailored it to the role that you're looking for, you can tell they're invested in it. So taking that few minutes to kind of make your experience, even if it doesn't seem relevant, tailoring it to the skills that you know that role is going to need, I think that can really stand out to an employer, that you really care about the role and you do have relevant experience. So definitely tailoring your CV to that position. And I think asking questions as well at the end, like even if there isn't anything that you can think of, come in with a general question, like what's the biggest challenge in your field at the moment, as Nick was saying, showing that you're invested in what they're doing, and asking them a question will be that last moment of an interview that stands out to them. Oh, this person is actually thinking strategically and understands the industry. I think things like that can really help you stand out.
Yeah, some really great advice there from both of you about how obviously our students can make themselves more competitive in an already competitive market out there. So some great advice from the both of you. And obviously our students are also quite interested in finding out more about sort of like, I guess, like the working realities of what it's like to be in a professional role. So we've had a question come through about someone wanting to find out more about what development opportunities that you've been able to undertake in your workplaces.
Tammy, I think you've got a very good example there, because you started in 2020, right? Straight after your master's, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, that's good memory
And then
there.
you've ascended into the lofty heights of management. So, you know, that's a very good example.
Yeah, so I think I started as a technician in 2020, and then kind of learned a bit about the regulatory systems, and I was kind of doing kind of more lab-based collecting data. And then about 6 months in, a job as a specialist came up, which I thought was very much underqualified for, but I thought I'm going to go for it anyway. And then I think there was a supervisor position that equally I kind of again thought I wasn't quite ready, but if you don't go for it, you'll never know. But I'd say that the company offers a lot of development opportunities, whether that's kind of in-person training. I know they've offered myself like various health and safety trainings or kind of process improvement trainings, like different courses like that, or also kind of attending seminars and things like that as well. But I think a lot of it you do learn on the job. And I think a lot of people see development as just being, how do I get to the next rung on the ladder? But I'd say development is also a lot about what you do day to day and how you nurture those soft skills. Like I've never managed people before, then all of a sudden was managing 4 people. That was a very scary moment. But you kind of just have to do what you think's best, follow the guidance of your mentor. I think having managers that I could trust, so that when I maybe didn't do something quite right, which definitely happened, I could go to them, get their advice, and try and build that relationship with the team so that we kind of trusted each other. But yeah, I think that's all I can think of right now. But I'll pass over to you, Nick. I'm sure you've got a lot more experience to pull on than me from your various positions.
No, I think you do yourself a disservice. You've got a real interesting story. And I think taking guidance from mentors and like trying to distill that into your everyday kind of work ethic with the people that are in your team is really important. I think a big one for me is talking about learning and development opportunities. Yes, we should all protect our personal time and our time at work. However, there is such a thing as work ethic. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone should, again, sell themselves for free to whoever they work for. However, we all have a portfolio to build, like an artist or a musician. And particularly in the sciences, we have to do this thing regularly, right? Which is called peer review, the art of peer review. That is how scientific methods get developed and published and science develops. So hence it's always been the art of the scientists to explore and understand new science and what's happening. And I'm of the mantra that you probably have to do that alongside or outside of your day-to-day job, because there's simply not enough hours in the day. So there's a lot of kind of personal development I think you do as a scientist, particularly in this industry, that is not written down. It's probably not going to be spelled out to you by your mentor or your line manager. It kind of has to be self-driven. That's not to say that you can't develop by just turning up to work and doing a 9 to 5. There are ways you can do that, but there is again, going to that idea of building a portfolio around you. I think you have to be mindful of that and take those opportunities when they arise. Again, don't be a yes person and say yes to everything, but if you're given an opportunity for exposure, particularly to an area that's new to you or you feel a bit uncomfortable with, grab it in both hands and see where it takes you. I think if you chatted to most of your future line managers or directors or mentors, most of them would probably tell you the same thing, which is, right place, right time. We will all come across some people that find themselves in a career that was very much self-driven and they're very much determined to do what they're doing. But yeah, I think being opportunistic is important, and therefore being open to change. Being open to change is a big one.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you both. Again, more great tips. And for you students as well. So development can even start now while you're at university as well. So we do have things like the mentorship schemes that you can join, but there's always loads of activity happening around campus that is being delivered by us, by student societies. So if you see something and you're maybe not sure about it, you know, ask questions and maybe just give it a go. Sometimes it's these random things where you discover things that you're interested in or lead you on to new and exciting opportunities. And we've had another question come through, again, finding out more about what the working realities are like. So
Can I just add the point there, Holly? And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to pick up on the point you mentioned there about campus and activities, and pick up on Tammy's point about part of her journey. If you're still at university now, you're in one of the greatest environments in the world to kind of already have some of that exposure before you even have to go to the effort of writing a CV and applying for jobs. So very early on, I recognized in myself that there were a couple of academics, and I really enjoyed the research that they were doing. This goes back to my undergrad and then later in my master's. So yeah, go and chat to them. Most academics would be very willing to take on someone who was wanting to go and join their laboratory and be a pair of lab hands or to help them do their research. Because academics typically don't have a great amount of money. So you find yourselves in a very good strategic position at the moment, those of you on the call, in that you have something that the academics don't have, which is you have additional pairs of hands, and presumably you have a good noggin on you to tackle scientific questions. So go and chat to those academics, see if there's a way either alongside your studies or perhaps during one of the breaks throughout the academic year, the different semesters, where you can go and do some, some help them answer their research questions, whether that be lab-based or do some data analysis for them. You're in a good, strong position to go and do that. So take that opportunity. It's what I did. Tammy, it sounds like you did something similar, right? You did some summer academic.
Yeah. So I did one helping build the collaborative teaching laboratory, build some of the courses for that one. I don't know if my face is still on the walls there, I'm sure.
That's really cool. I love that.
And then another one which was in the research laboratories, helping some of the postgrad students with their work. So I think definitely when those opportunities crop up, take them, even if you think it's a bit scary at the time. I think doing those now, even if it's something you don't go into later down the line, it gives you an avenue to test something out, doesn't it? So I think, yeah, what you've said, Nick, but there's so many opportunities at university that you're in the best place now and probably have the most time that you ever will once you get into the world of work. So definitely make the most of that at this point. I agree.
Definitely. Sorry, Holly.
Yeah, no, equally great points. Academics are a great resource to pull on because they might also be able to signpost you in different directions about other academics who might be better suited to help you, or resources to have a look at. So you never know what nuggets of wisdom your academics have, and they are keen to chat to students as well. So please do go and speak
Many
to
of
your
them,
academics.
particularly in EPS, many of them will have commercial collaborations. So, we don't need to go into it now, but, our academics at universities across the UK, they used to be judged purely on teaching and research publications. But now a lot of UK universities, particularly University of Birmingham, has put a lot of effort into building those commercial activities between academics and the commercial sector that Tammy and I work in. So yeah, I think you'd be surprised if you went and spoke to some of the academics, people on the call. You'd be surprised as to how many of them already have existing collaborations, with people like Tammy and myself. So you might find yourself doing an academic project, but it's actually sponsored by the Binding Site, for example. There's every possibility that you can be based at University of Birmingham and be doing a project in this sector without you necessarily knowing it.
Yeah, absolutely. The university does a lot of collaboration with various different businesses out there. And you'll all probably be surprised how much your academics get up to outside of the teaching that they do for you as well. So please do go and have a chat to them. And I guess moving again back to sort of like the working realities and things. We've had a question come through about what work-life balance looks like. And I guess, are there any things that either of you two do to make sure that you're maintaining a positive work-life balance, whatever that happens to look like for you?
I think it's a very good question. I know when you're at university, even when you're not in your lectures, you're kind of always thinking about the fact you've got an exam or a coursework to do. So I actually find weirdly that when you're at work, you kind of, when I finish, I finish. I've not kind of got this looming dread of I've got an assignment or an exam. So that was maybe a little bit of a shock when I came into the world of work, that it kind of almost felt easier to have that balance. I don't know if you feel the same, Nick, on that, but I definitely felt that at university you've constantly kind of got work that you're meant to be doing at all times. But I think one of the things that I definitely do is some people can kind of, it's very easy to stay behind and think, oh, there's a little bit more work I can do, and start working over your hours and stay in that extra hour or two each day. But I'm very stringent with, like, when it gets to 4 o'clock, which is when I finish, my laptop closes and I do not open it until the next morning. And I think that can be quite challenging to do, because to get ahead, you kind of do feel that pressure to always try and give more time, but you're only going to be at your best if you do have that time to shut down. So I think it's really important to set that culture, especially when you're a manager for a team as well. Sorry, the light in here is automatic, keeps going on and off when I move my hands. It's really important to set that culture and expectation for your team as well, because if they see you constantly doing extra hours, then they're going to think that's the norm, and then it kind of just spirals. So I think definitely having important to have time to kind of shut down and make sure you do that. Yeah, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Nick.
Yeah, I think they're really important points to raise there, Tammy. So yeah, I suppose that doesn't, what I'm going to say now doesn't negate what I mentioned, several minutes ago about building a portfolio and doing your own development outside of your 9 to 5. I think I'll still make my comment there. But yeah, I certainly think that protecting your own time is really important. Particularly, well, if you've got people in your team, as I do, it's really important to be seen that you have a good handle of yourself and your own time and that of others. If you can, exercise is a big one for me. It doesn't necessarily need to be an overzealous attempt to go and do a HIIT session in your 20-minute lunch break. That's daft, but like actually some of my greatest scientific ponderings and ideas have come from taking like a walk at lunchtime with colleagues. I also think as well, it's really good to be able to finish the day of work with like gas in the tank, is how I describe it. So, we're all scientists here on the call. So, if you can start your next day of work with some good kinetic energy, then that stands you in good stead to get a good day of work done. Of course, there's going to be various times throughout the year where that's not possible. And certainly for me, I work in a CRO, so everything I do is customer and client facing. So for want of a better word, sometimes my job is being a glorified customer service representation. And that is absolutely fine. I've been commissioned, and my team have been commissioned to answer scientific questions by someone who's paying us to do so. And certainly, obviously, Tammy works for a commercial company there. So yeah, there is that element of, the customer isn't always right. However, working in the commercial sector, you do have to be aware that there is a chain there. There's a chain of command, and there's a chain of commerce, and there's economics that go with that. So yeah, you have to be protective of your time, but you also have to understand that you do work for a commercial entity. So there's some flexibility that has to be had there, and an understanding, I suppose, of that bigger picture.
Yeah, I think the flexibility is important. I think as well, when you're trying to look at a company, understand what their flexible working policies are. If you think that you might want a hybrid working lifestyle, definitely try and find a company that supports that. I know for me, having a day or two a week work from home really helps with that balance, just with getting the other things that you need to do in your life done. And I know for people that have families, making sure that you do have flexible start and end times can be really important. So I think when you're looking at a company, definitely look at what you want in your life, kind of like more long term. I know you're going to be very early on, but looking at what a company can offer you in that respect, I think is quite important as well, because I think that can really help making sure you've got that flexibility where you need it.
Absolutely. Thank you both for that as well. And one thing that I know I get a lot of students that ask me, they ask about how they can apply their skills and their knowledge and how that actually translates into the workplace and how that might work in reality. So are there some core skills or knowledge that you use in your roles that you developed through your education and through your degree programs?
Yeah,
You want to go
big
first?
one for me. Um, a big one for me, particularly as a scientist, is the art and the importance of communication. So I think our role as scientists, and obviously most of you here are from EPS, I see the role as a scientist to take what is a complex idea and to disseminate it and distill it down into something that is palatable, and can be digested by a layperson. Um, so when you go into a commercial environment and there is lots going on, lots of emails, lots of calls, lots of meetings, the art of being able to distill all of that down into, you know, a one sentence email to your director or to your customer, whoever it may be, is really, really important. So actually, I think, yeah, my scientific kind of degrees have stood me in good stead there, being able to take some really, really heavy, complex information and be able to hand it to someone in a very neat package with a wonderful bow on the top that is well received and easy to understand. That's something that my degree taught me. I don't know, Tammy, if you've got something similar.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I think, as you say, you can be quite complex scientific ideas, and a lot of the time we might have to present those to people who are not scientists. Maybe a lot of people in quite senior positions, you might be presenting to the board, and there might be a finance director there, or I don't know, commercial director, and they might not necessarily have a scientific background. So I think, as you say, being able to tailor your presentation. So what information do they need to know? And I think look, when you're looking at different like presentations that you do at university, I think trying to think about how you would tailor it in different instances and communicate things effectively, because you know all the ins and outs of it, but do they need to know the ins and outs of it? And thinking about that can be quite important. I think similarly, another point on communication, when I was at university, I was a student representative, and that was kind of like finding issues from kind of the student body, raising the awareness of those, and then coming up with solutions to those, which is kind of a lot of what I do in my day-to-day job. And some of that can be quite challenging. You might be going to your CEO and saying, this is an issue, we need to fix it, which can be quite daunting. So being able to do that negotiate that in quite a good way, essentially, without getting people's backs up, or like coming up with a solution and presenting that in the right way, I think is quite important. From a scientific perspective, obviously, how to design an experiment. The science I'm working on now is completely unrelated, really, to the science I did in my master's. But I would say my master's taught me how to design an experiment to prove a hypothesis. And I think learning those key skills about how to design a solid experiment is actually more important than kind of the actual nitty gritty of what I was doing in my master's, I'd say. And I think I definitely still use that now when I'm supporting my team with their experiments.
Wonderful.
I've got one more point to add as well, because um, I still lecture at the University of Birmingham, several times a year, particularly on the Masters in Toxicology course. So I think we're in a world now where Birmingham University is really good at doing this. A lot of the undergraduate courses now, they have modules dedicated to computational programming in, something like Python or R, and they're doing lots of statistical analysis, particularly in EPS and in the School of Biosciences and And that's really exciting, and that is definitely a skill set that is now required in the world of 2025. However, the number of people in my team who are a little bit younger than me, they finished their undergraduate and master's degrees in the last few years, who don't have what I would call computer literacy skills. So what do I mean by those? Well, we still live in a world of where your main form of communication is going to be probably email. So, and those emails are going to be with a number of different people. There might be a candid email with a colleague or a peer in your team. There might be a more formal email with a director of the company, or indeed there might be a customer-facing email where there's some really important exchanges and information to occur. So the art of writing coherently, whether that be by email or otherwise, is really important. I'd also argue as well that depending on what organization you go into, Excel is, Microsoft Excel is still going to be a big part of most people's roles. So actually, the ability to navigate spreadsheets, compile data sets in Excel is going to be really important. You might be able to do it in Python and R, and that might be really exciting and it might be super, super shiny. But the organization you join will probably have members in that group who are, you know, they could be in their 50s. They could have been, 30, 40 years skin in the game. They probably don't have R or Python skills, and they probably are going to still be using things like Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Excel. So you need to be familiar with the tools that different people are going to be using in your organization, as well as those modern tools. So they're a couple of skill sets I see quite frequently in undergraduate students, is that they're very capable of performing advanced statistical analysis, but actually when it comes down to simple filtering in an Excel spreadsheet, not so. So yeah, that's a big one for me, which some of you on the call might think, oh, why do I need to learn Microsoft Excel? Well, you still do, because quite a lot of people in the world still use Excel. Tabby, I don't know if you have something similar.
Yeah, definitely. I think I thought I understood Excel when I went to the world of work, and then you get asked to do this complex analysis, and you're like, where do you even start? I think it's kind of an assumed level of knowledge that not everyone would necessarily have. I think probably the other point that everyone now who's at university will probably be using AI throughout university. Companies are now just starting to adopt that, and there's a lot of like rules and regulations about how you should use it fairly. And I think that's something that like the younger generation are probably a lot more used to using, but the older generation may not have as much insight, may not understand. So I think that's probably a bit of just a difference there with how to use it responsibly and when to use it and when actually to kind of make sure you're not just relying on that as your only source of information. But I think that's definitely a big emerging trend in the sector for sure.
Brilliant, thank you. So there's been some great takeaways, great bits of advice throughout the session. So I haven't had any more questions come in for a while, so we can probably start to wrap up as well. But I guess it's just one last point to end us on is maybe, are there any particular career highlights or achievements that you've sort of like gone through and happened to you so far, that you would like to share with everyone?
Good question. Do you have an answer straight away? I can think.
Yeah, I do. And I need to disappear in a couple of minutes. So I think a really nice one for me is I still firmly and strongly see myself as a Birmingham alumni. And I'm really pleased that in my career so far, I've managed to maintain a really active collaboration with the university in various different facets across university, whether that be teaching or publishing papers, or even just keeping up to date with what's happening, what's new in teaching and learning at the University of Birmingham. So that's a big one for me, is keeping that relationship going. I've never seen the University of Birmingham as just a service centre, as it were, for my learning. I've seen it much bigger than that, and that's paid dividends to me, because actually some of my mentors I still know and love now were those I met as academics or collaborators at the University of Birmingham. So yeah, never close the door off to people is one I would say. You know, even if you think a particular project is done, or you're done with a particular aspect of your learning, or whoever it may be, you know, don't fully close that door. Like, just keep it slightly ajar, because you never know when you might want to go back through that door again. And I think the University of Birmingham has been really good to me in that aspect. So yeah, that's a big career highlight for me, is that ability to kind of keep that that relationship going, I suppose.
Yeah, I think for me, I've obviously gone from kind of more of a lab-based role to a scientist role to now being in a managerial position. So I'd say my biggest highlight is kind of moving to the point of seeing my team kind of achieve the things that they wanted to in their career. So I think I've probably taken that step into kind of helping nurture the projects that they're doing and like the achievements they want to do. So like one of my team last week presented at the whole company town hall with like 1,000 people, and to see her kind of develop in that way, I think that's where I'm now getting my kind of successes from, is from seeing the team achieve what they've set out to, and their confidence build and their kind of projects kind of get to the completion. So I'd say that's kind of my career highlight at the moment, is kind of seeing the team achieve what they set out to.
And both such great highlights, such great achievements. And thank you both for coming along and sharing your insights with our students today and answering all of the questions that we've put to you. So as I say, we will now wrap up the session. So again, thank you to Tammy and Nick for coming along and chatting with you all and answering your questions today. And as I say, the event has been recorded, but obviously if any of you have any questions careers related as well, then please do come along and make sure that you engage with us in Careers Network and all of the services that we have. But thank you for attending today, and you are all free to go and enjoy the rest of your days. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye.